So, welcome to second season of Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. We're here at the Lobby Club in Trenton. Lobby Club is a members-only bar, restaurant, and workspace for business owners. I'm here with a good friend, colleague, former boss, and recently the former comptroller of the state of New Jersey. But I just want to real quick check. We're having a good time today. We have a little bit of a whiskey here. Uncle Nearest is a black female-owned distillery that actually Uncle Nearest taught Jack Daniels how to distill whiskey. So we're having a little bit of Uncle Nearest.
To your health.
To health, yes, there you go. So Kevin, I wanted to start by, let me explain something to you how I first originally met this man. I was a pastor in South Jersey, working on a group of pastors and organization trying to get legislators to do some things around a piece of policy. I have never met Kevin before. I walk into this room, there's about 20 people in the room, pastors, lawyers, advocates. And this discussion starts about how we began to approach legislators with whatever we were working on at the time. I knew nobody. I sat in the room and listened as discussion got heated and tension rose. And I heard Kevin said, you know what? I'm not going to be a part of this. If we're going to antagonize folks who are already for us, I will not be a part of this. And do you remember the first words that came out my mouth when you said that?
You can't leave.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I said, you can't, again, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know Kevin. I said, you can't leave. You're the smartest one in this room. That's what I said. And to this day, in many rooms that you sit in, I still feel that way. You're one of the smartest men I know, one of the great attorneys that's been around. And from that day forward, we got to know each other, and it's been a 20-year friendship.
Done some great work together. Very proud of it.
You're my boss at Fairshire Housing Center. And before you became the comptroller, and some of the legal work that you've done over the years is just extraordinary.
Thanks.
So that's how we first met. I said, you can't leave. You're the smartest guy here.
I'm still here.
So tell me a little bit about your background, Kevin. I think I know your background, but a lot of people don't know the tenacity and the fight that you fight in justice. Where did you grow up? Like, where are you from?
I grew up in Pennsauken, New Jersey. In Camden County. I fifth of 5 children. Parents were Irish immigrants who owned a landscaping business, worked very hard. My siblings were all born in Camden, so my family had a tie there. My family left Camden for Pennsauken when my mom was pregnant with me in 1973. And it is great upbringing, great, my parents did a really, really wonderful job. I feel like I had a great childhood, and I feel like they exposed me to things. I grew up in an environment, in a broader community, in a family that emphasized our Irish heritage and told stories about it that I think informed what I became interested in as a young adult and as an adult. And where in particular I grew up, I think informed my understanding of the world and some of the important issues we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, you know, moving from Camden to Pennsauken at that time was like a suburban stepping up, but Pennsauken became one of the racially integrated communities in South Jersey. So tell me about, was at the family table, dinner table, was race and politics and religion discussed in the house?
I mean, certainly we were a very, very Catholic family. We went to Catholic school. We went to church every Sunday. My parents, my father was a landscaper who wore a Walsh landscaping t-shirt, I think 6 days out of the week. And on Sunday, he wore a suit to church. It was, in keeping with, I think, their upbringing. It was a really important part of family life and of community life. It was, we were, where we were at the time was not racially diverse, but as a family, my parents maintained their ties to Camden in lots of ways, both in terms of volunteering, dropping off casseroles at the cathedral kitchen, visiting people in the neighborhood who they remained close to, and looking after some of the older neighbors who were there. With the landscaping business, a lot of our employees were from Camden. And so I feel like in some ways, growing up in suburbia, the inner city, especially a small place like Camden, can seem foreign. To me, it was not as familiar as exactly where I lived, but nor was it foreign.
When did you start to notice the race and how politics played a role in that?
So I grew up and school wasn't diverse, the neighborhood wasn't diverse, but living in close proximity to Camden, I sort of had understood, without naming it, I understood what racial and economic segregation was. I just didn't have the words to discuss it. And there's the notion of I'm going to need some help from you here, Pastor. The notion of pilgrimage and learning while being a pilgrim. You need to leave home in order to understand home in some ways.
Yeah.
And so that started happening for me in college. I went to college in Washington, D.C., and we went on a volunteer trip to Mississippi. And there was literally a white side of the tracks and a black side of the tracks. And I was outraged by some of what I saw and by the disenfranchisement of the folks in the black community and the way that where they lived, the houses flooded and snakes got into the walls, and the higher land was where the white folks live and didn't flood as much. And there was literally a railroad tracks that ran down the middle that separated them. And the sort of ground moved underneath my feet when I understood that where I lived, it wasn't railroad tracks that separated my town from Camden. It was a state highway.
Wow.
And I started to process what I then over time learned while in college was sort of a post-war HUD, federal government funded white flight and suburbanization that my parents took part in, and what devastating effects that had on Camden and on the wealth generation or maintenance of communities of color who lived in Camden. It wasn't an accident that happened, that was policy. But that took a long time to understand, and I feel like I'm still understanding it. In my senior year of college, my senior thesis was on the decline of Camden, what caused it, and I think understanding those things sort of eventually moved me to get involved in implementing, defending the Mount Laurel Doctrine while at Fair Share Housing Center. There was a direct line between those experiences in Mississippi, an understanding of history and of policy, learning about poverty and its impacts on folks, and then doing that work.
Well, I forgot we had that similar experience. You went to Mississippi. I was raised and spending a lot of time with my godparents in Mendenhall, Mississippi. So my summers as a kid growing up was in Mendenhall, Mississippi. So wow.
So this was the Mississippi Delta. Clark's something or other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
it marks Mississippi. It was the start of the Poor People's Campaign. Was the town we were in or nearby.
Mendenhall was not far from Jackson. We're going to ride into the city. It's like, but yeah, it's interesting. And I guess what made you decide to go to law school? Like, was that something that you?
Largely an accident. I didn't know what to do with my life, and my college roommate had an extra LSAT application.
Really? Wow.
Sometimes you just got to be open to your roommate having an application and giving it to you, and the rest. I got excited about it after I took the time to think about it, but I just hadn't given what comes after school a lot of thought.
Well, you definitely got your calling. I remember the first time I saw you argue a case, it was, I don't know if it was the New Jersey Supreme Court, but it was. And I was like, oh shit, I think I missed my calling. I should have been.
I think there's still time, Eric. You're pretty good, man.
No, you're one of the best at it. So let's transition to your public life in terms of your time at Fair Share Housing Center. And how did that shape your political philosophy?
I think what Fair Share showed me was the importance of the rule of law, because it had, at that point when I started there in 2000, the law was not being honored by the state or by municipalities in the way it should have. It showed the importance of an independent judiciary that could recognize what was going on and base in law a response that tried to address, the two societies that New Jersey had become.
And the law was what? Just so people understand the law.
Yeah, the law under Mount Laurel was that all towns have to provide a realistic opportunity for their fair share of the region's need of affordable housing. And so we didn't really start in a way. There were a lot of interim victories, some losses, but it took a decade plus to get to a place where we, along with others, were able to return Mount Laurel to being the effective check on municipal zoning power that it was meant to be. And what it showed me is that the combination of sustained, focused effort, a commitment to framing things in a way that is fundamentally about social justice and civil rights, and grassroots power sustained over time.
Let's talk about that power. Like, what did you learn about power before holding that? What was it about it that you learned on your tenure at Fair Share Housing Center about power? I mean,
I think that collective power can move mountains, and so I think that if you looked back on the Mount Laurel Doctrine in 2000. There were folks who had declared that it had lived its heyday.
Oh yeah.
And that it would that make and half of the this is where you and I started working together. Half of the obligations could be paid by one municipality to another for a pittance, thus avoiding both the benefits of increased supply and housing that is affordable, especially to families being built in places where the jobs are plentiful and where the schools are able to help lower income families thrive.
Yeah, I called it blood money when I first learned about this.
Yeah.
We started working on, in essence, wealthy towns would pay urban cities to take their allotment of affordable housing just to pay the money just to get rid of, to keep black and brown folks out of their community. And that was appalling to me as a pastor at the time. And learning about that and working with you in that experience was amazing. Then, you spent 20 years building fair share housing, defending the law, and then you get called from former Governor Phil Murphy to become the comptroller.
There weren't many jobs I would have left Fair Share for, I think, at the time. 20 years was a long time, but that was a job when I fully understood what it involved. It involved being an independent watchdog, which is substantially what we did at Fair Share. So with 140 employees and I didn't have to raise money anymore in order to do work. It came in the form of a budget, and so it was really, really important work. So. I started that in January 2020.
What does a comptroller do? I didn't really understand that until you got the position. I'm like, let me look into the
So the state comptroller, and I was acting state comptroller because my local senators wouldn't allow me to go even to sit down for a hearing. But I did the job the same way for 6 years, whether confirmed or not, and to his credit, Governor Murphy nominated me a total of 3 times, even though he probably at some point figured out that the Senate was not likely to act. So what it involves is investigating and auditing all aspects of government finances and operations at the local level, at the county level, in school districts, in universities, in colleges that are public, and in state agencies. And then when appropriate, when necessary, sharing that information with the public, making recommendations for changes, making criminal referrals if we happen upon things that might be criminal to prosecutors, to the Attorney General. And, we're intended to be a check on politics run amok when self-interest overcomes the public interest. It's our job to nudge government in the right direction. Doesn't always work. We rarely have the power to actually require something to happen, although we do in some contexts involving Medicaid and involving public contracting. But for a public interest attorney, it was a dream job.
You're actually saving taxpayers' money, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The office brought back in $100 million a year in Medicaid funds. So I'm out of the job now, to be clear, as we sit here at the end of January. But it was a great job, a great honor to do it, and it's an important job to protect the interests of taxpayers, but also to protect our democracy, and so that taxpayers can know that there is a circuit breaker within government that has access to almost all information and can help government get better.
So, you spent your whole entire career, because I want to be clear about this, Kevin, because I think some folks, knowing those who know you and know the work you've done as a comptroller, and there's been you investigated a lot of high-powered folks, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. They assume that you have some personal vendetta or something. I don't know, but from your background, you've been doing this your whole entire life. This is not personal. This is what you do.
I mean, this is what the legislature intended. The legislature intended for there to be an independent part of government detached substantially from the governor's office that accepts complaints from the public, identifies risk that money could be used for the wrong purposes, shares information about how to do it right, which we did the office did before I got there on Hurricane Sandy, and I did it with some really talented folks when it came to guiding local and state government entities on the use of COVID funds.
Well, you were pointing out dysfunction in government before you were comptroller around Hurricane Sandy at Fairshire Housing
right.
Center.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Government doesn't work. Government works much, much better when there are folks who use their constitutional rights, whether it's free speech or it's the ability to file a lawsuit and obtain due process. When there are people that are helping government, challenging government, pointing out. We when I was at Fair Share during Hurricane Sandy. We pointed out that the plan that Governor Christie put together violated federal law.
Yeah,
you and I worked on that.
Yeah.
And it resulted in, at the time, maybe still, the nation's largest fair housing settlement.
Almost $1 billion, over 800-something million dollars.
Yeah. That
you were able to save taxpayers. My point is,
a bunch of us.
Well, our staff. My point is, you were doing this before you were the comptroller.
And I suspect that doing that work and doing it well with you and with others is what led Governor Murphy 2 years into his term to welcome me to serve as comptroller. What
was some of the dysfunction that you continue to see in government that will always seems to rear its head?
Yeah, I mean, there is the legislature piles on responsibilities on state agencies, but rarely looks to see what's actually happening with that.
Wow.
And so, there's a lot of great examples in government of government doing what it's supposed to do and doing it well. But there are also a lot of examples. I spent a ton of time on nursing homes, on policing, on tracking ways in which insurance brokers cost taxpayers money by sort of exploiting conflicts of interest. Those are all the sorts of things that I think everybody would acknowledge problems in.
Yeah.
But our politics keep us from addressing it. And overall, we've sort of acquiesced in a level of corruption that I think many people in government find uncomfortable, that many politicians know is wrong, that certainly the residents of New Jersey are really sick of, but that nobody can figure a way or has figured a way out of it. And sometimes we double down on that sort of corruption.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish, and that we're talking a little bit about this because I want folks to think that we're anti-government. Actually, we're pro-government and trying to get government to work correctly. One of the reasons why I started this podcast is to get people a sense of folks who are elected officials, get a sense of who they are and what their political philosophy is. So what's the difference in how you see corruption versus system failure? Because I think some of this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, some of this is corruption, but some of it is just the system itself is not working.
Yeah, some of it is poor leadership. Some of it is that that as a government we're trying to fix problems that very sophisticated actors have created, and government can't catch up because it's using tools that are decades old. The regulations haven't been updated in a long, long time, and so the problem that is supposed to be addressed, it can't be because either the regulations aren't good enough or the people who are carrying them out don't feel empowered to do it, and they don't see a mandate from the leadership within government to solve the problem. And so, we lose probably hundreds of millions of dollars a year siphoned away by nursing home owners, Eric, and that was occurring in the 1970s, and they tried to fix it. It was occurring in the 1980s. But I don't think there was ever really a let's really fix this moment, and that's both taxpayer money disappearing and mostly recipients of Medicaid who don't have much of a choice about where to live or what nursing home to go to, who are receiving substandard care, dying early, suffering. And the state has done a bad job with it. It's those sorts of issues that in order to fix, you need to go at it all the way and get past press releases and half measures and really understand it and fix it.
You've taken on some really high-level, powerful figures in the state. What surprised you about their reaction to your reports and the work that you've done?
I feel like it's sort of been it's been pretty wide. There's been a range of reactions, I should say. Some folks said, "You're right, we're going to fix that." Other folks said, "Nothing." And then there's sort of the category of folks that where there's like a little bit of a narrative, but the reality is the folks who complained the loudest and grumbled the most were really the minority when it came to reactions. They may have been able to they probably stood out the most with the press. But the reality is most of the work that the agency did, both before I got there and while I was there, was really work that the folks who we were overseeing, the folks we were evaluating, they either welcomed it or they accepted it without the sort of bombastic complaints.
Interesting. Was there, when you think about your tenure there, and we've talked about the issue of race and segregation and poverty, was there a particular investigation that you've done that you got into and dug into it that really changed your view, not changed your view, but saw race differently or how trust works in the system?
I mean, I think that, there, after the murder of George Floyd and the very substantial effort both in New Jersey and nationally to address concerns around policing, New Jersey did the same thing. New Jersey responded and appropriately under multiple attorneys general, but sort of promises of reform without anyone checking into it. It makes the actual reform taking hold much less likely. And so we did things like look to see who gets out of tickets and showed how courtesy cards are a real part of policing in New Jersey. We evaluated the state police and whether it was complying with much further back reforms out of a federal consent decree, and found that much of what occurred was performative, was not actually targeted to ensure that if profiling was occurring, it would be identified and addressed. And so those are the sorts of issues that I think, whether you're a civil rights advocate, whether you're somebody who feels like you may have been uniquely treated unfairly on the roads, or whether you're just a New Jerseyan who cares about fairness, those are the sorts of issues that I think are important for somebody in government, independent of political processes, independent of the governor's office, to be willing to take a look at and raise the red flag when there are concerns.
How do we move the needle, Kevin? How do we go from doing, reform and changes on the fringes, but to real structural change? How do we do that?
It takes real leadership. I think you saw it early on in Governor Murphy's term when he before I got to the office of the state comptroller, focused on tax credits and really rampant abuse involving them. There was a comptroller audit, there were public hearings, the governor and his staff pushed for reforms. Fortunately there's been some rollback on that at the end of the governor's term. I just saw yesterday Governor Sherrill criticizing that billions of dollars of tax credits were in legislation that at the end, she thought was inappropriate, which is something I agree with. I think that if you give out tax credits and do not require that there be a net benefit, you're actually going in the direction of the reforms. You're going against the reforms that were initiated during Governor Murphy's time, and so I thought that was unfortunate. But it is that sort of sustained focus on change that is needed, and then you got to keep doing it. You can't just let it sort of go, because the power and some of the inclinations that are the powerful in New Jersey have will probably return it over time to something, unless there is great vigilance by people implementing the programs, to something that goes back to the way it was done that we were all critical of.
Those reports and the things you're talking about now, when it takes real leadership, and you ran that office with tremendous integrity.
Thanks.
What did that take on you personally? How did that take a toll on you personally?
I'm a week out from the job, so I'm sort of figuring that out. When I left Fair Share, I don't think I fully understood how busy we were, and so I'm still processing all of that. But I don't think it was. I think as an advocate who's done this work for a long time, I understand. I've gotten pretty good at managing the stress around it, and I still enjoy doing the work even when it's stressful. There's a calm that I'm able to get to. Even when the work we were doing, whether it's litigation or whether it was my work on getting rid of the death penalty in New Jersey, or whether it is serving as a watchdog, I feel like there's a way in which, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, and you are doing it with folks who share a similar mission, and you're doing it in a way that is aiming at building something bigger, addressing a problem, you let the chips fall where they may. And that, for me, is the sort of thing that reduces stress and allows me to keep going.
When you talk about building something bigger, what are you referring to? Like, what is your vision of building something bigger around?
I mean, whether it was, I was referring generally to just making the world better. And it is, that's as a public interest lawyer, as a civil rights lawyer, as a government watchdog that oversaw the executive branch and was trusted to access, confidential information and share what was appropriate to share with the residents, with policymakers, with the press. When you're doing this work, you realize that you're serving a bigger purpose that is in the case of affordable housing, addressing longstanding problems from the supply of housing to the intense racial and economic segregation of the state. When you're serving as a government watchdog, the bigger goal is supporting democracy, saving taxpayer funds, hopefully developing, maintaining, improving public trust in government.
You mentioned briefly about the fight to get rid of the death penalty. That was something that was huge for you. Why was it so important for you to work on that and play a huge role in that?
So I clerked for the New Jersey Supreme Court and was asked to write a court opinion affirming a death sentence, and I found it very, very difficult to do, and ultimately decided I was unable to do it. And that sort of, for me, it helped me understand that deep down inside, I did not think that the government should execute people in order to deter crime. I didn't believe that worked. I did believe it was discriminatory, and I thought it was just a complete and total waste of money, given that life without parole was a cheaper alternative and likely more effective.
It's interesting, Kevin. I've known you for 20 years, and we've talked a lot about this. And I'm not going to tell folks the nickname I gave you. But somehow, was there a moment in your life that really charged you to take on these issues of racial injustice and inequality? Like, you have, as an Irish man, a lawyer who grew up in what America call a white home. Of course, Irish didn't become white until much later on. Why would you take on these fights? Why did you care about what's going on? What was it?
I think part of it is to have been raised in a household where my parents were economic refugees from Ireland. I think that gave us a certain sensitivity to all sorts of issues, and they were great role models in caring about other people, whether it was the employees of the family landscaping business or whether it was...
And most of them were what ethnic background were they?
Latino, yeah.
So you worked firsthand with the Latino population?
Yep. Yeah, spent many a teenage summer, cutting grass and landscaping and seeing just how hard those guys worked every day. And seeing my parents treat lower wage employees with dignity and respect taught me a lot. So I think, Eric, part of it is that I was raised in an environment where Catholic social justice teaching, especially in high school and in college, and I volunteered for a year with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. That was really part of my instruction as a responsible American, was to understand what, and Catholic, to understand what that social justice teaching was. But part of it is also I like a good fight. I think that there's something. I think you combine those things up, and I think it is possible to engage in good, effective, adversarial efforts without being a nasty person, and I like that. I like doing that with you. I like doing that with civil rights leaders. I like doing that with, it might be because I'm the fifth of 5 children and have a decent sense of grievance or something. I don't know.
Irish boxers was always the hardest. If you was a black boxer, you didn't want to spar with an Irish guy. That shit was hard, man. The fight that the Irish have is just like incredible. And it speaks to how much of a fighter you are. You just hate injustice. You hate people getting taken advantage of. And you're to stand up for it. Like that's.
I do sometimes feel like it is, if not now, then when? If not me, then who? Sort of thing. And those are the moments when my faith teaches me that to those who much is given, much is expected. And so and it's fun. Honestly, I've gotten paid for 26 years. To work as a lawyer, doing work that if I were independently wealthy, I would have done in the same way It's been an honor to do the work. It's been an honor to work with folks who like doing the work, and the idea that I've gotten to make a career out of doing work that is fundamentally about recognizing the dignity of people and the importance of democracy and the importance of good, effective government. I've been lucky.
Well, let's be clear about one thing, Kevin. Like, you didn't enter public interest law firm because the paychecks you've gotten was nowhere near what you could have gotten clerking for the New Jersey Supreme Court and going to a prestigious law firm, which you could have chose that path. Public interest attorneys don't make that kind of money.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been as much fun. It wouldn't have been as rewarding, I think. That's not the path I chose.
Yeah, or the path that chose you.
Maybe.
Yeah. What was some of your proudest moments being the comptroller?
I think that there's a way in which government is I think assumes unique responsibilities to protect the vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so some of the work we did involving Medicaid and where the money went, especially in nursing homes, work we did evaluating how investigations occurred in the Department of Corrections when people who were incarcerated there claimed that they had been assaulted by guards. We found really serious problems and reported on that. We had multiple audits and investigations that involved how the state protected children who they had some role with, whether it is Medicaid funding people who work closely with children, or it is how a state agency responds to claims of sexual abuse. It's that sort of thing that somebody in government, that is independent every now and then needs to look at these things. And part of what we found is that in multiple instances, the approach the government selected to protect children was outdated and ineffective, and hadn't really kept up with what our current understanding was of risk of sexual abuse and after many of the scandals over the past decades. And so we reported on it, and we pushed the agencies and the providers to do better.
What do you feel like you didn't get a chance to finish?
I can't talk about that. Yeah.
I understand. So, in terms of being a comptroller, coming out of it now, what advice would you give the new comptroller coming into position?
I think that there's lots of ways that democracy is protected, that the government is protected, but a watchdog is one important way. And so I think finding the way to do that in a way that is effective, protects taxpayer funds, and communicates to taxpayers about where government can improve is a really effective and important thing to figure out in your own voice. Each comptroller has a different approach, a different voice in approaching those issues.
What lessons would you say our viewers and listeners of this podcast should take away from you and this experience being a comptroller?
I am fundamentally, at the end of the day, from the work I have done as comptroller, from the work I have done as a government watchdog, for the work I've done as a housing advocate and civil rights lawyer, and as a resident of New Jersey, I'm fundamentally optimistic that the problems the state confronts can improve. It often starts with grassroots power to help it improve. It often starts with a good, effective lawsuit, but it can also start with government doing it itself.
Knowing you're always like, look, if we're not suing somebody, we're not doing our job. I was telling someone the other day, I was watching The Untouchables with Robert De Niro and Kevin Costner, and Robert De Niro being Al Capone said, my neighborhood, you can get further with a handshake and a gun than you can with a handshake. And sometimes that's true. Like, you got to bring the stick.
And New Jersey has a great independent judiciary that we didn't win every case, and I did work other than housing. We didn't win every case, but I never doubted that we were getting a fair call by the judge. We never doubted that the decisions that we got were as independent as they could be of any judiciary in this country, and that should also give folks confidence. And Governor Murphy, to his credit, I think has built upon this state's history of independent judiciaries.
Yeah, I think people can really take away from, I think, the role that you play as watchdog is to improve government, to hold government accountable. And one of the things that Speaker Coughlin said when he was on this podcast, we were talking about the national climate and how toxic it is with between Republicans and Democrats. And he said in New Jersey, we don't have it as much. We have it, but it's hard to judge someone's motives when you know who they are. And New Jersey's fairly been pretty good at working together to get some serious legislation passed. And will we can continue to do that? I'm hopeful. I'm wondering where the optimism comes from. You being in that position, the comptroller sees some really nasty, dark stuff.
Yeah, look, I when I started to fight the death penalty in 2000, there had never been a state in modern times that had gotten rid of the death penalty through legislation pushed by grassroots efforts by residents of the state. It had happened by a court decision. It had happened by, sort of the whole thing just bogging down for different reasons. I think when a bunch of us gathered together, and they were meeting before I got there, but when I got there, there were 8 or 10 people regularly showing up, a fairly ragtag, committed group, but far from sophisticated on how to pass such an important piece of legislation. And yet, 7 years later, New Jersey abolished the death penalty. And it took bold legislators who were unafraid to, maybe they were a little afraid, but they realized we were wasting money. They realized it was unsafe because sometimes juries get it wrong and judges get it wrong, and we got rid of it. When around the same time in 2000, when I, with Fair Share Housing Center and folks who had been doing the work for 25 years, when the Mount Laurel Doctrine was pretty unpopular.
Yeah.
Governor Christie ran on getting rid of it.
Yeah, he did.
The Governor McGreevey, suburban mayor, while governor, did a really bad job on housing and on Mount Laurel, and had a DCA commissioner who again and again adopted rules that the courts found to be inconsistent with the state constitutional obligation. And now, 26 years later, after how many lawsuits, and the folks, and I've been out of it for 6 years, so I was in it for 20 years and then went to work in government. But just in that 20 years, but especially in the last 6 years, there has been a sea change as far as an understanding of the importance of housing to families. The dynamic of it being something that is no longer a third rail, but actually can be a political positive for some folks who 20 years ago would not have in a million years run on a platform of affordability, shows, I think, what is possible. And what I would love to see happen is those same sorts of dynamics make New Jersey a lot less corrupt. But the people, as in both of those, there needs to be a sustained effort. There needs to be a grassroots fuel. There needs to be an appropriate sense of outrage in many of those instances. And we can make sure that would help make New Jersey less corrupt.
Wow, that's powerful. So I think we should end on that note, because that was a powerful statement. One of the things that we ask our guests before they leave is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Yep. So I am very driven by a notion that Henry David Thoreau shared, I think in his book Walden. It's a long quote. The last part of it it says that he'd hate to live his life and then get to the end of it and realize that he hadn't really lived it. That's a very rough paraphrase. but that really drives me in what I'm doing and in the decisions I make about how I spend my time and what my family and I and my wife and our 4 boys, how we approach the world is that we're focused on the right things, often doing something that is eventually, hopefully, going to make the world a better place. And that is what I think, that quote, when I have a tough decision to make, helps me look back. It helps me look forward and say, what will make my life meaningful? Yes. And that is what I have overall attempted to pursue.
That's powerful, Kevin. I think that's I'm reminded of Howard Thurman, one of his books. He said, people aren't afraid to die. They're afraid to die without meaning, without purpose. And so that reminds me of it.
It's a good one.
Thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate it. Let's have a sip of Uncle Nearest on our way out.
To Uncle Nearest.
Appreciate it. That's a wrap. Hey, this is Reverend Eric Dobson, and this is Navigating Realities podcast where dialogue meets understanding. Follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can find us on all streaming platforms.